The mist rolled thick over the docks of Fisher's Bay, shrouding the weathered planks and creaking boats in a ghostly veil. Detective Hank Mallory stood by the water's edge, lighting his last cigarette of the day. The scent of salt and rotting fish mingled with something sharper, death. Captain Jed Fisher's body had been dragged out of the icy waters that morning, his throat expertly slashed and his hands bound with fishing line. It wasn't just murder, it was a statement. And in Fisher's Bay, a town steeped in grudges and dark secrets, statements like this were rarely random. Hank Mallory wasn't your typical detective. He had a knack for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, though his methods often blurred the lines of legality. In this town, he liked to say, sometimes justice came down to a well-timed bluff or a well-placed observation. This time, however, Mallory knew he'd need to rely on his wits. The killer wasn't going to make this easy. His first stop was the Rusty Anchor, the town's watering hole, where secrets flowed freer than the beer. Stella Merrow, a fiery redhead with a sharp tongue, was behind the counter, wiping glasses with a rag that had seen better days. Once Jed Fisher's lover, she'd been cast aside for a younger woman not long before his death. "Funny seeing you here, Hank," Stella said, smirking. "Let me guess, you're here to solve the mystery of who finally did the world a favor and killed Jed." "Something like that," Mallory replied, leaning on the counter. "Who hated him enough to do the deed? Who didn't?" Stella shot back. "But if you're looking for motive, you might want to talk to Tommy Finch. Jed ruined his old man's business. Kid's been glaring holes in him ever since." Tommy Finch was easy enough to find, hauling crates of cod down at the docks. When Mallory approached, the boy froze, his face pale. "Detective," Tommy stammered. I didn't do it, I swear." "Relax, kid," Mallory said, studying him closely. "Nobody's accusing you, yet. Just tell me where you were last night." "I was home," Tommy said quickly. "But nobody can vouch for me. Look, I hated Jed, sure, but I didn't kill him. I wouldn't even know how to tie someone up like that." Mallory narrowed his eyes. Tommy's words were shaky, but his hands were steady, no calluses from tying fishing knots, no cuts or bruises that would suggest a violent struggle. Something didn't fit. Back at the scene of the crime, Mallory crouched by the blood-stained dock. The fishing line used to bind Jed's hands was expertly knotted, a classic trucker's hitch, the kind used by seasoned fishermen. That ruled out Tommy, the kid barely knew a bowline from a square knot. It also made Mallory reconsider Jonah Briggs, Jed's longtime business partner. Jonah had the most to gain from Jed's death, control of the fleet and its lucrative routes. But Jonah wasn't the hands-on type. Mallory's gaze shifted to a patch of dried mud on the dock. Mixed in were faint traces of something shiny. He picked up a small, silvery scale, fresh fish scale, to be exact. His mind clicked into overdrive. Mallory paid Jonah a visit that evening, catching him mid-drink in his opulent study. "Hank," Jonah said smoothly. "I hear you're busy chasing shadows. Don't tell me you've come to drag me into this circus." "Maybe," Mallory said, shrugging. "You've got motive. But you don't strike me as the type to get your hands dirty." He placed the fish scale on Jonah's desk. "But whoever you hired made a mistake. These scales, they're from a cod, fresh caught within the last 12 hours. Know who else handles fresh cod?" Jonah's smirk faltered for just a second. "Deckhands," Mallory continued, lighting a cigarette. "But not just any deckhands. Jed's deckhands. The same crew you've been sweet-talking since last month, promising them raises if they jumped ship to your fleet. Looks like one of them decided to earn a little extra." Jonah scowled. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Mallory asked, leaning in. "See, I already spoke to your crew. Funny thing about fishermen, they know knots. And one of them, Roger Klein, seemed especially nervous when I asked about his alibi. Said he was at home, but his wife let slip he came in soaked to the bone late last night." Mallory let the silence stretch, watching Jonah's face. Finally, the man cracked. "Fine," Jonah hissed. "Roger did it. I paid him to scare Jed, not kill him. Things got out of hand." Mallory nodded, standing to leave. "You should know better, Jonah. Fisher's Bay has a way of chewing people up and spitting them out. You're no exception." By dawn, Jonah and Roger were in custody. As Mallory stood by the docks, watching the sunrise over the bay, he allowed himself a small smile. He'd solved the case without throwing a single punch. In Fisher's Bay, it wasn't brawn that won the day, it was knowing which fish to reel in, and which to let wriggle on the line.